My favorite memory from the Women Build was stepping away from the house and standing at the sidewalk and just watching all these women build and work on my future house. That was a very happy moment for me.
Smart, lovely women came and just were super supportive. It was like seeing old friends, and we just got to work.
The Women Build work at my house was sponsored by Lowe's. They put their faith, their time, their donations, helping me.
You see, these ladies are having fun, and I think it makes them feel good because they're helping other people build their houses.
It's more enjoyable knowing that you have your house because of your hard work.
Now my daughter's not sick all the time. I started saving. That allowed me to go back to school, and I'm a registered nurse right now.
I teach kindergarten and first grade. This is what I did today with my kindergartners. I don't think that I would have been the mom that I am now if I didn't go through the Habitat program.
It was basically the first time that I could say, this is my house. I'm proud that I could have a place for my daughters where they can feel like this is my home.
My kids don't have to move around anymore. There's nothing in this house that's gonna make them sick. My daughter, so she was 8 months old when we moved in. She hasn't known any other house. This is the only house she's ever known.
Morning, everyone. It's so good to see you here today, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Catherine Schmidt, and I am the president of the board of Paterson Habitat for Humanity. I am so happy to be taking part in this proud tradition of the Women Build, which has been happening every year since 1991. That's 30 strong years of women helping women. 30 years of women coming together to build stronger and safer communities. We continue that tradition today. Of course, this year's Women Build looks a little different compared to past years. Due to the pandemic, this year all Women Build events are being held virtually, including ours here at Paterson Habitat for Humanity. In fact, this week is Habitat's Women Build Week, and many other Habitat organizations are also meeting today at this hour to celebrate and hold their own Women Build events. This new virtual format gives us an opportunity to do something different. So instead of swinging our hammers today, we have brought in experts from around the state to educate us on an issue that many families in New Jersey are being affected by: lead safety. Instead of raising a wall today, we are going to be raising our voices to focus on this safety issue that is especially important to women and families. While Paterson Habitat homes are newly built and contain lead-free paint and pipes, we are embracing our role in the community at large to advocate for the mitigation of and the eradication of lead in older homes, and to help create safe and healthy environments for all families in Paterson, in Greater Passaic County, and throughout New Jersey. It's worth mentioning that our neighborhoods are comprised largely of women and children. And as we know, women and children are the populations most likely to be affected by poor living conditions. And in these times, women are also facing challenges as a result of the pandemic. Women are frontline healthcare professionals in the fight against COVID, and they are essential workers in other critical sectors such as education, food service, and transportation. And yet, women are disproportionately bearing the brunt of the pandemic's economic consequences around the globe. During this year's Women Build, Habitat for Humanity International is raising awareness about these issues. Now, clearly, Women Build events provide an opportunity for women to take a proactive step to serve their communities. But Women Build events have also been places for us to learn new skills. I know that I have learned how to put up insulation, even on the ceiling. I perfected caulking doors and windows. I have to admit, though, that no matter how much I practice, I don't think I am ever going to be good at hammering nails. I seem to bend many more than I ever sink, so I am leaving that job to the experts. But I know that the skill we need today, raising our voices for the greater good, is something that we all know how to do. So let's do it. Let's unite as women helping women. Let's send a powerful message about our strength and solidarity, and let's work together to make a difference. To help us do this, we will be hearing from a number of guest speakers and experts today. The Honorable Benji Wimberly, Assemblyman from the 35th Legislative District of New Jersey. Anthony Diaz, Community Outreach Coordinator, New Jersey Future. Dr. Charlene Gunjil, Director of the Passaic County Department of Health. Stacy Berger, President and CEO of the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey. Matthew Hirsch, the Director of Policy and Advocacy, also of the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey. And our own Scott Millard, Chief Executive Officer of Paterson Habitat for Humanity. I also want to recognize a number of other important voices who are with us today and to thank them for being here. State Senator Nellie Poe, sorry, Nellie. I practiced that so many times and still got it wrong. Nellie Poe of New Jersey's 35th Legislative District. Deputy Mayor Minnie Hiller-Cousins, City of Passaic. Yvette Rowland, Chief of Staff for Benji Wimberly. And Carrie Ruff, Director of State and Local Relations, Habitat for Humanity International. Sari Aquino-Soya, U.S. Advocacy Campaign Associate Director, Habitat International. And Audrey Johnson, Associate Director, Government Relations at Habitat for Humanity International. I also want to give a shout out to Habitat for Humanity's national partner, Lowe's Home Improvement, who has continued to support and work with us on the Women Build initiative across the United States and in Canada and in India. I really know that together we can do this. So to start us off on this journey, I would like to introduce Assemblyman Benji E. Wimberly. Assemblyman Wimberly was first elected to the Assembly from New Jersey's 35th Legislative District in November of 2011, and then he was reelected in November 2019 for his 5th term. He currently serves as the Deputy Speaker of the Assembly. He is Chairman of the Housing and Community Development Committee and Co-Chair of the Joint Committee on Economic Justice and Equal Employment Opportunity. Assemblyman Wimberly also sits on the Assembly Budget Committee, the Transportation and Independent Authorities Committee, the Joint Committee on Housing Affordability, and the Joint Committee on Public Schools. He previously served on many other legislative committees, including the Judiciary Committee and the Women and Children Committee. He's a graduate of Virginia State University and holds a teaching certificate from William Paterson University. He has been a teacher of children with disabilities, a football coach, and I might add, a championship-winning football coach multiple times. And he is the head of Paterson's Recreation Department. Assemblyman Wimberly, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning to everyone. Paterson Habitat for Humanity, Gail Levinson, Matt Hirsch, for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. You know, as you talk about Women's Build, these things, you know, went through our mind. And as you know, I'm a strong supporter of Habitat for Humanity, in particular here in the city of Paterson. You've helped really beautify our community and have a sense of pride. And I think about two young ladies who I know that are part of Habitat for Humanity, Nakia Stacker, and now Jessica Shute, who's working here within me in the city. And I see the pride that they have, not only with their homes, but also with their children and what they do in our community as far as giving back to the community, and particularly here in recreation. I think it's so important that, you know, you guys continue to highlight, you know, women. I am a product of a single mom growing up in public housing in a lower income area of Paterson as a kid growing up through Paterson Public Schools. And I know many of the issues that you're facing with lead and homelessness and you go on, just affordability. And with COVID-19, everything's been heightened even more. So I just can't thank you guys enough for what you do here, not only in Paterson and the surrounding area, but throughout the state of New Jersey. And please know that I am here for you as the chair of housing. Matt's a regular on our housing hearings and our voting sessions, and know that whatever we could do for you, we are here for you. I live it every day, and I understand, and particularly living in an area that is so densely populated like Paterson, we're 8.4 square miles, well over 150,000 people, with a crumbling infrastructure due to the industrial basis of the origins of the city of Paterson. So the work you guys do, I like to salute you. I like to salute all the women who have rolled up their sleeves and made their lives better and the people around them better. And like I said, I really want to salute, in particularly, the two young ladies that I work with here in the City of Recreation and throughout the community service, and Nakia Stacker and Jessica Shute. And guys, just know that we are here for you. Do not ever hesitate to call on me for any assistance. So thank you, and continue the outstanding work.
Thank you, Assemblyman Wimberly, for joining us and for your leadership. Next, we welcome Anthony Diaz, Community Outreach Coordinator of New Jersey Future. Anthony coordinates and acts as a liaison for the community organizations involved with the Lead-Free New Jersey program. He ensures that Lead-Free New Jersey is centered on the needs and perspectives of the people and communities directly affected by lead in drinking water. Prior to New Jersey Future, Anthony was an IT director at Bronx Preparatory Charter School. Anthony co-founded the Newark Water Coalition, an environmental justice organization focused on lead-free advocacy. Anthony has been involved in several grassroots organizations, such as Black Lives Matter Newark, Homes for All Newark, and a Movement of the People. Thank you for joining us, Anthony.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I never heard my biography put so quite well. Thank you for having me. Before I share my screen, I want to say how important it is to be a part of this panel. Thank you, Scott, for inviting me. Last night I was at a protest, and I really realized how women have been at the forefront of a lot of different struggles. My grandmother, my mother, just really struggling and fighting for a lot of different rights. So for me, this means a lot to me. And so thank you for having me. Let's put my presentation on. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. So the importance of lead-free legislation. So about 250,000 children are affected by lead issues since the year 2000. We know 80% come from paint, 20% usually comes from water, but there are so many different contributing factors when it comes to lead poisoning. One of the things that I stress a lot in my work is how this affects you over time, that, you can't see this, you can't taste it, you're almost unaware of it. And the health implications that lead has on the body is disastrous. It dramatically alters the course of your life. And that's why I think lead-free legislation is so important, because we need to make sure that we're preventing this instead of reacting to the issues that are out there. And this is an issue that has been going on for, several years now, and we're in the best position to remediate all the problems. What I'm thankful for is that now this is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. Thank you, Assemblymember Wimberly, for, putting legislation forth. And I know there's several bills out there, and I'm very, very happy about that. So just for the health impacts, a lot of people think, when it comes to lead poisoning, you think of the children first. If you're under the age of 6, it's developmental. We're seeing like ADHD, we're seeing cancer rates increase. We see it affects the kidneys, the blood, the nervous system, the body. We're finding that there's a correlation between aggression and violence when it comes to lead. Some folks and researchers are starting to believe that a lot of gang violence comes as a result of lead poisoning. It's very, very it's when you hear about these things, you're like, oh man, pregnant women are affected when it comes to formula, the developmental stages of the fetuses in the body. In adults, people think that lead poisoning doesn't affect adults, but a lot of our seniors are affected because lead replaces calcium in the body. So if you have osteoporosis or arthritis or some kind of those problems, we're seeing that lead disastrously affects the end of life care for seniors. So I want people to understand that this is not just okay, we solve these problems and we're done. It's like once you have these issues in your body, the best thing to do is to solve the source of the exposure. And so we want to make sure that, or if you leave today from this presentation, I want you to understand that there is no safe level of lead. The CDC says there is no safe level of lead. So it's a national problem. We're seeing that water systems all over the country. You can take a look at that map. The red does not mean good. The red in this case means bad. So you can see that there's lead violations all over the country. And again, my source of expertise tends to be on the water side. But now in learning about this issue and learning where the different exposure rates comes from, I understand that it's not just the water, it's a holistic approach to solving this problem. We need to tackle the issues on soil. We need to tackle the issues on paint. We need to tackle the issues on the dust particles. And so I want to stress that, again, we're here talking about Paterson and the state of New Jersey, but this affects people all over the country. And we know this disproportionately affects communities of color. And as the community outreach coordinator, I'm always harping on like, hey, we need to make sure that we're solving these issues in partnership with community, that we're not doing this just top down, but this also comes from a bottom up approach. You would be surprised how many times I talk to families that have no ideas about the ramifications of lead. And it's a lot to do with education. And so another component about this is don't just take this information, don't just be on this panel and, hear all of our stories and hear all of our data and information and just leave it there. Please share this information, activate the people in your community, mobilize. And this is just another map. This is, again, hundreds of communities with elevated levels of lead. If you do the research, you would be so fascinated about how this issue is just all over this country. And you would think that, it's the year 2021, we have the access to the most technology and the access to the most knowledge ever. So why is lead still a problem? And a lot of it has to do with, again, you don't think about these things because it's not in front of your face and this affects you over time. So I want to keep stressing that point again, that there is no safe level of lead. And the best thing that we can do is push for policies in our communities and across the state to solve this issue. And I believe that New Jersey can be at the forefront of this problem. We can be this, example for the rest of the country on how to solve and tackle these issues. And then I'll end by saying anybody can be an organizer. A lot of people say, Anthony, how do I get involved in the struggle? I can't be out there on the bullhorn. I don't necessarily need you to be out there on the bullhorn. I need people to make calls. I need people to write emails to your legislators, to write emails to your city council and to the municipal people with the power to actually make changes in this regard. Again, share the information that you learned here today. You can hold a meeting, a Zoom call now. Everybody has access to this. And it's important, it's very, very important because we understand that by planting the seed today, that we know that we can prevent all of these issues from occurring in the future. And I just want to stress again that it's important that lead is not something that was just in the 80s and the 70s or even the 90s, that it's still affecting us today. And we want to make sure that the people that are on this call just don't take this information, but actually go forward with it, because we know how this affects so many communities of color, and we know how this just affects communities in general. So thank you for once again having me. Please reach out to me. I'll put my information in the chat if you want to partner. I love doing these presentations. I love doing these calls. Thank you again, Scott, for having me. And I hope that we can partner more.
Thank you so much for being with us, Anthony, and for educating us on the importance of lead-free New Jersey. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Charlene Gungil. Dr. Gungil is a notable professional with expansive public health experience in the state of New Jersey. A 1988 graduate of William Paterson University, Dr. Gungil currently serves as the County Health Officer and the Director of Passaic County Department of Health. After graduating from William Paterson, Dr. Gungil continued her education, earning a Master of Arts, a Master of Public Health, and eventually a Doctorate of Health Science degree. In addition to being a licensed New Jersey health officer, Dr. Gungil is also a registered environmental health specialist. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ashley. As you were talking, I was wondering where you got your information from. It was accurate, but I just wondered about that. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to be on this panel this morning to talk a little bit about what Passaic County is doing regarding the lead problem in the community. If memory serves correctly, in 2016, the then governor passed regulation reducing lead content in blood for children from 10 micrograms per deciliter of blood to 5 micrograms per deciliter of blood. And that was a big deal for us here in Passaic County and throughout the state, because that meant that we were able to now identify more children that need our help and that we could bring out of being with in homes or around places where they were exposed to lead. So as a result of that, 35 municipalities and counties applied for grants from the State Department of Health to educate, mitigate if necessary, and remediate the lead problems in homes and also in some businesses, which could lead to exposure for our children. I'm happy to say that last year, towards the end of last year, Passaic County received one of those grants. And it was just over $200,000 to hire a lead manager, to hire a registered environmental health specialist, and to mount a campaign regarding lead exposure, whether it's in paint, whether it's in blinds, whether it's in spices, wherever it is, and also to mount something that has not been done yet in Passaic County, which is throughout this county to bring our mobile unit and do testing. So we were able to get that grant and that's the exciting part for me, that we were able to purchase a vehicle from other sources. And our plan, it continues to be our plan, is to go into the community with our doctors and nurses and to do lead testing of children and also, if necessary, of paint, because we are going to have all the resources to do that. It's exciting. Actually, I hired a new nurse yesterday, but I guess the enormity of the challenge was a little bit too much for her. So today she emailed me and said that she really could not do this. But I'm still hopeful because I do know the effects of lead in children, and that effect is not just when they're a child, but it is long term, and it affects their ability to be a fully functioning member of our community. It affects their ability to pay taxes. It affects their ability to have a full life. And so I'm excited about getting the grant. And I do have the environmental health specialist. I have another health officer that works with the lead program. And now, as hopefully, as COVID-19 is paring down and as the weather is changing, our next step within the next couple of weeks is to get that mobile unit out into the community and start doing our lead testing of children. The city of Paterson has such a grant. So does the city of Clifton, and I believe the city of Passaic as well. So we Passaic County is going to be focused on the municipalities that are not within their grants, so that we have total coverage for our entire county and for our children. So thank you for having me on this panel, and I'll stay on for a while to see if there are any questions, but I do have another COVID call I need to be on in a few minutes at 12 o'clock. So thanks again, and I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for sharing information with us on Passaic County's efforts to ensure the safety of families. Paterson Habitat for Humanity is proud to be a member of and partner with the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey, working to create housing and revitalize distressed neighborhoods throughout the state. We thank the network for supporting today's event and prioritizing lead safety on behalf of all New Jersey residents. And Stacy Berger, the president and CEO of the network, for joining us today. As the president and CEO of the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey, Stacy directs the statewide association of over 250 community-based development organizations, created in 1989 to enhance the efforts of these groups to create affordable housing and revitalize their communities, and to improve the climate of community development in New Jersey. Prior to joining the network, Stacy worked for 9 years with New Jersey Citizen Action, where she went from being an organizer to the political and legislative director. She's won numerous awards and is considered a leading expert in affordable housing in New Jersey. Stacy, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me and for that lovely introduction, Ashley. I'm a big fan of the Paterson Habitat for Humanity family and Habitat for Humanity in general, and it's an honor to be invited to participate with all of you. It's funny that you mentioned, Ashley, that I started off at Citizen Action, because one of the things we started off doing when I was there, which was 1996 was a long time ago, was focusing on New Jersey's childhood lead poisoning epidemic. And although we have made some strides over the last 25 years, we still have so much more work to do. About 4,800 children are poisoned in their homes by lead paint. Although we get a lot of media coverage and a lot of concern that is very genuine and necessary around water, about 85% of lead poisoning that we can identify in children comes from the paint in their homes. And that's because New Jersey has a very old housing stock, and it's particularly true in our urban and some rural centers where paint that used to have lead in its production continues to be painted over or improperly rehabbed, and so that paint flakes and it winds up on the windowsill, which anybody who's been around a toddler for 2 minutes knows that's a really interesting and fun thing to entertain themselves. Is the minute mom or dad or grandma or aunt or uncle looks away, the kid just does this, starts to play around at the windowsill, and the next thing you know, that child has an elevated blood level. And so we were successful, as the previous speakers mentioned before, in dropping the elevated blood lead level from 10 to 5. And I believe it may go down further. Don't quote me on that, but I thought that it was going down to 3 at some point, Charlene. Charlene's giving me the thumbs up, so my stats are good, which means that we are catching more children that are suffering from this environmental and frankly, public health crisis by having a better testing regimen. But we also need to have better resources to help improve the housing stock so that our homes are not poisoning our kids. It seems like an insane thing to have to say out loud in 2021, but when children are spending so much more time at home because of the pandemic, and they're staying with their families in potentially in overcrowded conditions or in unsafe housing, their exposure to lead is that much worse. And so we have a few policy recommendations that we are cautiously optimistic will move forward. I can see on the participant panel, we are joined by Assemblyman Wimberly and his crackerjack chief of staff, Yvette Rowland, who have been tremendous partners in moving this legislation and legislation in general around housing affordability and housing and health safety. So we are grateful for their leadership and the leadership of the folks in both houses who are working to make sure that everyone has a safe, affordable place to call home. I'm going to ask my colleague Matt Hirsch, who's the Director of Policy and Advocacy, to talk about the two pieces of legislation, the inspection bill and the remediation opportunities, since he knows those in slightly more detail than I do. I have just enough information to be dangerous, but I know you're on a tight time frame, but I'm happy to stay with you and answer any questions that I might be able to provide answers for.
Thank you, Stacy.
Oh, you're in the office.
Yeah, I'm in the office, and Stacy says that she knows just enough to be dangerous, but she is a consummate advocate. So I just want to state that. Thank you so much, though, to Catherine Schmidt, Scott Millard, Steve Keyhays, and the team at Habitat. Special thanks to Gail Levinson, who I've really, she's the advocacy chair for Paterson Habitat, and really enjoyed working with her on this event over the last few weeks. So thank you. I do want to just, as Stacey just mentioned, there are a couple of pieces of legislation that can help. And fortunately, in Paterson, we have the best representation around to make sure that these bills can move. You just heard from Assemblyman Benji Wimberly, who chairs the Assembly Housing Committee, and his Chief of Staff, Yvette Rowland, are making sure that bills like this are addressing public need, and that the public safety and the public health considerations are addressed. So I'm going to share my screen so we can just go over that. And I'm sorry for the background noise. So just briefly, you know, we're not, so at the Housing Community Development Network of New Jersey, we advocate for bills that reflect the needs of our membership. And as Stacey mentioned, we've had a long and fruitful relationship with the Paterson Habitat and have done a lot of work in the Paterson community. And these bills will directly benefit the people of Paterson and the state of New Jersey. So let me just, and as you heard from Anthony before, this is a little bit of retread, but I won't spend much time here. Homes built before 1978 New Jersey may contain lead-based paint, and these pose significant health risks for young children, pregnant women, and seniors. Landlords must disclose the presence of lead paint in the home built before 1978, and renters must receive a federally approved pamphlet on lead poison prevention. But houses built before interior lead paint was banned can still contain copious amounts of lead paint, leading to childhood lead poisoning. And as Anthony mentioned, there are 4,800 new cases of childhood lead poisoning in New Jersey a year, and that there is no safe level of lead exposure, which has the potential to cause slower growth in children, lower IQs, and behavioral problems. The network has long been an advocate for lead-free communities. In our report, Thriving Cities, a New Urban Agenda, which you can find at our website, www.hcdnj.org, calls for lead inspections as an integral part of building healthier communities. And just a quote from here: "We must ensure that all homes are free from lead, mold, and other toxic or harmful products by requiring municipalities to conduct lead paint inspections in 1- and 2-family rentals or home sales, and encouraging them to address hazards and toxins in the home." As Anthony had mentioned before as well, the network is part of a lead and water and lead-free task force with New Jersey Future. So we are looking at this issue as a holistic issue. The bills that I'm going to talk about lead paint interiors, but lead and water obviously does present other significant threats to our communities. So here's the legislation, and I know we're not all legislative advocates here, so I want to walk us through these a little bit and make it clear how we can advocate for these bills. There are 2 bills in the legislature right now that are moving through the committee hearing process, and we're fortunate because both of these bills include Chairman Wimberly as a prime sponsor. So in recognizing the need, Chairman Wimberly make sure that he is advancing these legislations that address the public health needs in our communities. But as the chair of the Assembly Housing Committee, he has the ability also to make sure that these bills have a hearing. So that's our task today. And there are 2: requiring lead paint inspections at tenant turnover and property sale. Basically, this bill does exactly what it sounds like. It requires lead paint inspections prior to home purchases and tenant turnover. And it makes a lot of sense. It establishes educational programs about lead paint poisoning, and the network devotes considerable efforts to getting this bill passed into law. This bill is actually in motion. This bill passed the Senate Economic Growth Committee back in September, and it's awaiting a hearing in the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee. So that's the Senate side. On the Assembly side, we are still working to get this bill a hearing. And I've worked with Chairman Wimberly's Chief of Staff, Yvette Rowland, on making sure that this gets on a future agenda. The second bill is similar, but approaches lead paint a little bit different. This requires municipalities to conduct lead paint inspections in 1- and 2-family rentals. And as Stacy mentioned, the lion's share of our rentals in New Jersey are smaller rentals, and many of them are still contain lead paint in the interiors. This would require towns to inspect every single family and 2-family rental dwelling located within the town for lead-based paint hazards at least 5 years. Fee structure, and there's a fee structure. Oops, sorry. There is a municipalities would charge a fee for inspection, and the town would also impose a $20 fee per unit into the lead hazard control assistance fund. This is also awaiting a hearing in the Assembly Housing Committee, and it's also been assigned to the Senate Community and Urban Affairs Committee. So these are two really strong bills that would put the onus on the municipality and the property owner to make sure that their properties are properly inspected and ideally remediated, and thus reducing the exposure of lead to our families. So how do we do this? Well, we just heard from Chairman Wimberly, and we just heard from and his Chief of Staff, who are we are really lucky to have them in the position that they're in, because they are very responsive to the needs of the community, and they're also very responsive to the fact that these bills need to move, and it's always an uphill battle. So what we're going to do is we're going to call our I should state up front, and Gail, I hope you're listening, that we will have an action alert going out later this week that will give specific instructions on how to contact your legislature. Everybody on this call will receive instructions. So we're going to call our representative and tell them that children should not serve as lead detectors, and that common sense measures requiring routine lead inspections deserve a hearing. And again, everyone at today's virtual event will receive an action alert later this week with specific instructions on these and other key issues. And I would love to hear from you. We need to make sure that that your voice is being heard as we advocate for these bills at the state level. So please contact me at mhirsch@hcdnj.org. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about these important pieces of legislation. I feel really good that after today and with our advocacy, that these bills will get a hearing in the near future.
Thank you, Matt, for the important overview, and we look forward to receiving the call to action details at the end of the week. All participants, we have your email, so we will be forwarding you those details via email, so please look out for that. We have a few moments scheduled in our program to take questions from the audience. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen where you can submit questions, and we will have the appropriate panelist answer them for you. The first question is that both bills are commendable. Is there a legislative interest in combining the two bills? Whoever on the panel would like to answer that one. Matt?
I think Stacy had her hand up.
Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead, Stacy. Can I unmute yourself?
You'd think by now I would be a pro at unmuting myself. Matt, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's not that I think, and if Chairman Wimberly wants to correct me, I don't think that it's a question of legislative interest. I think it's a question of legislative drafting, and that because they deal with different statutes, they're not combinable. If they wanted to get moved as a package, that would be great. I don't think it's that's not the holdup. I think the holdup is making sure that our community organizing and activism is stronger than the folks who don't necessarily want to have to do or pay for those inspections.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone, Matt or Assemblyman Wimberly, would you like to add anything?
If Yvette has anything to add, I know she's here, but I will say that just exactly what Stacy said. But these bills both address a similar problem, but in a slightly different way. And so I think it's from an advocacy standpoint, rather than We don't always have to be in the weeds on necessarily bill numbers, but what we can do is we can advocate for the fact that lead inspections need to happen, and when, in tenant turnover and on some regular basis, and it needs funding. So that is, and we have these two pieces of legislation that address that need.
Ashley, is it okay if I add one other thing to that? Oh, there's Yvette. Hey.
Assemblyman.
Hi, guys. I'm sorry. I'm multitasking, but I heard the question. More than likely, we wouldn't combine it. I think, even though they're very similar, I think it's something that, we could talk to leadership about, but I think we would move them separately.
Sorry about that. My mute button was not working properly. We have a multi-part question next. If lead is found in the bloodstream of a child, would they be eligible for some type of assistance? Is there any research on whether the effects of poisoning can wear off with time? If so, would then poison-free adults be eligible for vocational and job placement assistance for lost work, education, mental development time? If not, can we make an argument for that need? Sarah.
I think the first part of the question, which was with a child with elevated lead levels, is there support for that? Is that the first part of the question?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. So we work with landlords to reduce the lead in whether it's in the paint or wherever it is in the home. We send our inspectors out to identify the sources of lead, not just in the home, but we've also actually found it in daycares and different places. So that's the remediation part. We try to remove it. And then there are also others in the community who have received funding to help with getting, if the child is in a home that is owned by the family, we do have the ability to connect them with sources that could help them to find the resources to fix that. What was the second part of the question?
So then, is there any research on whether the effects of poisoning can wear off with time? And if so, would a then poison-free adult be eligible for vocational and/or job placement assistance for lost work, education, mental development time?
That's a great question, and I honestly don't know the answer. Perhaps somebody else might know the answer, but I don't personally know that answer. So I'm just going to jump off, and maybe Anthony or Stacy might have the answer to that question.
Stacy, did you have something to add?
I do. I have a couple. I can partly answer that question. Unfortunately, lead poisoning is entirely preventable, but very difficult to treat. There's a chelation process that children can undergo to reduce the impact of lead poisoning in their blood, but it's not something that folks can overcome with medical treatment, even if they're able to access it. It's permanently damaging, and it creates a whole lifetime of problems for people. And so that's really, really challenging. And one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we stop using kids as lead detectors in our homes, because once we found out that a child has lead poisoning, there's some medical intervention, but it's not curable. And we don't want to set children up for a life of difficulty and inability to achieve their full potential because they lived in a home, or they visited a home, or they went to daycare in a home that had lead poisoning in their walls or around their windowsills. Which is why we really think that there's a need for remediation. There's a fund that former Governor Christie raided for many years that we finally forced him to reinstate, and that Governor Murphy has continued to fund, and that's the Lead Hazard Control Act fund. It's about $10 million a year. We'll probably see Chairman Wimberly and Senator Poe in the budget process talking, and we'll be talking about the need to increase funding for that program instead of instead of some of the things that are proposed in the current budget. We think that would be a better use of funding if there's excess funding in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Making sure that there's lead-safe homes for every child in our state would be a critically needed thing to do, because it will reduce our healthcare costs, it will reduce our special education costs, and it will also allow people and families and children to live to their full potential and not reduce their economic livelihoods and their ability to be at whatever and wherever they want, because this really is it holds people back because it impacts their ability to think clearly and interact with folks in an appropriate way.
Thank you so much.
And I'll add my 2 cents to it is research projects like Charlene is doing is something that I would definitely am trying to do in Newark as well, is that, we have to understand all the sources, the problems, and the long-term effects. That way we can put in programs for folks that have dealt with this long term. But we need to do more research, in my opinion, in order to make sure that we can solve this both on the front end and on the back end.
And I'd also like to add that when our nurses do the home visits, they also do an assessment, right? So that assessment could include nutritional needs. It could include, what does that family need to bring the home, for example, up to code, right? They will help them. They'll help the moms or the dads or whomever it is to look for areas where they can, clean better or work better or declutter or whatever it is to make that home safe for that child. And so with subsequent testing, we have seen and we are required to see a decrease in the blood lead level of children. So we don't end the intervention by just identifying the sources of lead. We actually go further and try to mitigate instances where the child or children could continue with that. But the research that you asked about, that long-term research, I don't have that information at my fingertips. Okay.
Thank you. We have 1 or 2 more questions. Is there any other states, are there any other states that have addressed lead very well and are good models for New Jersey? Oh, got you on mute there.
Well, I'll jump in. So I can only speak for the water portion. I think Colorado has done something similar to Newark has done something well with replacing its lead service line program. And passing legislation where they can go onto the owner's property to make sure that these lead service lines are replaced. Now, what I've seen in Colorado with their lead service line replacement program is that they offer point of entry filters for each house in the interim while their lead service line is being replaced. So I think that's amazing. That's something that I would definitely like to bring into more localities in New Jersey, is that, you're providing a solution while you're providing the long-term fix. And there's little things like that that's happening all over the country that I think are good things that we can do in this state as well.
Thank you. Did anyone else have anything to add to that one?
Actually, it's Stacy. The state of Rhode Island has done a pretty good job. They have a similar housing stock to New Jersey in terms of the length of time that housing has been around. Somebody asked about the need to disclose whether if the house was built before 1978, you have to disclose that if there's a threat of lead paint. But remediation is really dependent on discovering that a child has been poisoned, which is a backwards way to do things. And so other states have done a better job of making sure that the inspections are done upfront, and certainly Rhode Island is on the list. There's a national organization we work with called Green and Healthy Homes Initiative that has a great list of possible priorities for states to adopt, and this is one of them. And I think if we look at the aggressive funding and outreach that the city of Newark did to resolve their lead service lines and we try to transfer that to the paint issue. It's a good model. It's not exactly transferable, but we have some great mechanisms that are sort of homegrown here in New Jersey, and one of them is provide deep funding upfront for minority and women-owned businesses to train and staff remediation projects, and we have that a little bit in the Lead Hazard Control Fund. That's essentially a pilot program that's been on the Department of Community Affairs agenda for quite a while. If we could expand that to have a lot more money, we could do something akin to what the city of Newark did for lead service lines. For water, we could do for paint, and that would save both money in terms of the resources that folks who are poisoned by lead need, and improve the lives and outcomes of the people most impacted by lead poisoning. It just takes some upfront funding.
Thank you so much. That is about all of our time for questions today. There were a couple of questions in the chat that did not get answered, but we will do our best to try and find those answers for you and get back to you. Last, we have Scott Millard, Paterson Habitat CEO, with us. Thank you, Scott, for being with us today.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you everyone who has joined us today. It is my privilege to be the CEO of this fabulous organization and to have the opportunity to work alongside so many fabulous women who help us build homes, communities, and hope each and every day of the year, not just on the day and the week of the year that is dedicated to Women Build. I'd like to thank each of them, and specifically, I'd like to thank Ashley Biggs, our Chief of Staff, Sarah Weiss, our Communications Manager, and Gail Levinson, our Advocacy Chair, who were instrumental in gathering us together today for this incredible, timely, and critical event. I'd like to thank each of our fabulous panelists. I'd like to thank each woman who has joined us today to build. Because we are building hope, we are building communities, we are working together to build safe homes. Our mission is to build homes, communities, and hope, and often that looks like raising hammers together, but increasingly, and not just because of COVID, it looks like a lot of different things, like coming together to advocate for the critical issue of safe homes and eradicating exposure to lead. So thank you for being part of that. As Matt said, we will be sending out an action alert at the end of the week with specific next steps that you can each take to help us achieve this goal of safe homes for every child in our city, in our community, and across our state by getting rid of the lead exposure. And building homes, communities, and hopes takes on many shapes and forms. And sometimes we get to see the results of that work immediately. Like when we come together to raise hammers and pound nails, it's a very tangible thing we get to see immediately. But often the work we do, we don't get to see the immediate results because the outcomes take time. The outcomes are generational in nature. I'm here today in no small part. In fact, in large part because of a woman, my mom, who dedicated her life to building hope for 3 boys she raised by herself, while also working full time to build hope for the Paterson community for over 30 years as a nurse just across town from where I'm sitting today, likely having no idea that the work she did for years would lead to this day. So thank you to all the women who are with us today for all the things that you do, big and small, each and every day, to build homes, to build community, to build hope. It takes many shapes and forms, and you are making a difference each and every day, whether you feel like you're seeing it or not. So keep doing the good work. Stay safe, stay socially distant, wear a mask, and get vaccinated as soon as you can. Thank you all for joining us today.